You can spend $1 million announcing your commitment to open source. The Bazaar will still know whether you mean it. In January 2007, I was at LinuxConf Australia as Novell's pre-sales specialist for ANZ. That year, I had brought in 15 million in new revenue. My manager covered the bar tab when Linus Torvalds needed someone to pick up a round. His reply was a smiley face. He knew exactly what Novell was buying. Not the drinks, the position. Today, the open source pledge formalizes this. $2,000 per developer per year. Corporate sponsorships grew 75% in 2024. The mechanism has a name now. The logic never changed. You cannot purchase community legitimacy. You can only put yourself in the room long enough to earn it. Which AI companies are actually in the room?
Let's get into it.
This is the Hamberger report. I'm Andreas Hamberger, Enterprise Architect and Technology Leader, Wellington. LinuxConf Australia 2007 was not a routine technology conference. It was the first gathering after 4 years of legal siege. SEO had filed suit in March 2003, claiming Unix code ownership inside the Linux kernel and threatening enterprise customers who deployed it. Novell had acquired SUSE in November 2003 for $210 million, in part to assert countervailing Unix copyright claims and give enterprise customers legal cover to keep running Linux in their data centers. IBM had entered the fight. The case was grinding toward resolution, but the deeper question had not been answered. Could commercial interests and the Bazaar coexist without one eventually consuming the other? The answer, if there was going to be one, was going to come from the people in that room. LinuxConf Australia had been running since 1999, founded by kernel hacker Rusty Russell using his personal credit card at Monash University. It moved cities each year, sustained entirely by volunteer organizers and community sponsorship. It attracted kernel developers, distribution maintainers, security researchers, and the project leads who kept the Bazaar running. For 5 days in late January, the Asia Pacific became the center of the Linux universe. Novell was there, as were Google, Red Hat, IBM, and a dozen other companies who had decided that showing up mattered. Not with booths and banners, with people, engineers, developers, pre-sales specialists who could hold technical conversations at the level the room demanded. I was one of those people. Pre-sales specialist for Novell ANZ, selling SUSE Linux Enterprise Server across Australia and New Zealand. I had also, the previous year, built a Linux distribution in the basement of an Auckland house that had reached #1 on DistroWatch. Two facts that were about to intersect in a way I had not anticipated. The distribution was called Yoper. It had been optimized from the ground up for desktop performance on commodity hardware. Speed was the entire point. Tobias Gershner had carried it forward when I could no longer give it the focus it deserved. But the #1 ranking on DistroWatch had been the community signal. The Bazaar had looked at something built in New Zealand and said, yes, that. I did not yet know how significant that signal would turn out. The conversation with Linus did not happen by accident. Crispin Cowan introduced us. Crispin was the inventor of AppArmor, the Linux security framework that would eventually ship with every major enterprise distribution. His introduction was brief and precise. 3 words, the fastest desktop from scratch. That was how he described Yoper. It was accurate. The distribution I had built on evenings and weekends had been optimized from the ground up for desktop responsiveness on commodity hardware. Speed was the entire point. Crispin had understood that, and Linus, it turned out, had heard of it. Not in passing. The conversation that followed went into the architecture, the compile time optimization choices, the trade-offs between desktop responsiveness and server workload profiles, the decisions that made Yoper fast and what they cost in other dimensions. This was technical engagement, at the level the Bazaar reserved for things it had actually considered. I had spent the better part of a year building that distribution. The Yoper #1 ranking on DistroWatch had been the community signal, and now the person who had started all of this was engaging with the technical choices as if they mattered. They did matter, finding out that he knew it mattered. By the time Linus said, just put it on Novell's tab, we had been talking for some time. The bill arrived the following morning. My manager laughed. Records are there to be broken. I want to be precise about what that reply represented. That year, I had brought Novell 15 million in new revenue across ANZ. The bar bill was proportionally a rounding error, and my manager knew it. The reply was not managerial equanimity in the face of an awkward expense. It was the return on investment calculation delivered in a single line. Novell had spent months making the legal argument that it was on the community's side, asserting Unix copyright ownership, indemnifying enterprise customers, making it commercially safe to keep deploying Linux. It had spent years making the technical argument through SUSE's engineering. The bar tab was something different, a signal entirely spontaneous and unrehearsed, that when Linus Torvalds needed someone to cover a round, Novell was the company in the room. Google and Red Hat running tabs at the same event was not coincidence. It was competitive acknowledgement that the community's trust was worth funding. You do not earn it by announcing your Linux credentials in a press release. You earn it by sending people who can hold their own in a room full of kernel developers, and by covering the bill when the formal tabs run dry. You cannot buy community legitimacy. You can only. In 2007, corporate investment in open source community gatherings was largely informal. By 2026, the same logic has been codified into structures with names and minimum standards. The open source pledge, backed by more than 40 companies, sets a minimum contribution level, $2,000 per developer per year, directed to open source maintainers. GitHub sponsors has processed millions of dollars in community investment that would previously have been invisible. The Linux Foundation's corporate membership tiers connect annual contributions to governance participation across dozens of critical infrastructure projects. The mechanism is identical to what Novell was running in January 2007. The formalization is new. What drove it was not altruism. It was the same return on investment calculation my manager made in seconds. Community legitimacy is a business asset. It does not appear on a balance sheet, but it determines whether the Bazaar treats your organization as a participant or a parasite. Companies funding developer conferences, contributing to open source tooling, and putting engineers into the rooms where the AI community gathers, understand what Novell understood. Community trust is earned from inside the Bazaar, not purchased at the perimeter. The ones issuing open source commitment press releases are running a strategy the Linux community saw through 20 years ago. The bar tab teaches. According to research from daily.dev published in December 2025, corporate sponsorships of open source projects increased 75% in 2024 alone. The mechanism has a name now. The logic never changed. The AI labs are now running the same calculation, with higher stakes and less consensus on how to get it right. The companies funding developer conferences, contributing to open source tooling, and putting engineers into the rooms where the AI community gathers, understand what Novell understood in Sydney. There is a difference between presence and participation. Presence is announcing your commitment. Participation is being in the room when the tabs run dry and covering the round. The Bazaar has always been able to tell the difference between the two. In 2026, the stakes are different. The infrastructure being built on top of open source tooling, including the large language models, the training frameworks, and the deployment pipelines, is more consequential than anything the Linux wars were fought over. The community trust equation has not changed. The consequences of getting it wrong have grown by an order of magnitude. The Bazaar can tell the difference between presence and participation. There is a photograph from that evening. I am wearing a Linux Ironman t-shirt and an orange LinuxConf Australia lanyard. Linus is in a dark shirt and khakis, and we are both smiling. The venue is somewhere behind us, palm plants, and a covered atrium, the kind of tropical indoor space that makes Sydney in January feel like a reward. I have thought about that evening a great deal in the years since, not because it was the high point of my Novell career or because Linus Torvalds is famous, because of what it confirmed, the work done in a basement in Auckland, on evenings and weekends, funded by nothing more than the conviction that desktop Linux deserved to run fast, had been noticed by the person who started all of this. The Bazaar is a meritocracy, not a pure one, not an uncomplicated one, but one that pays attention to code and community in ways that corporate hierarchies do not always manage. The Yoper #1 ranking on DistroWatch was the community's signal. The night at LinuxConf was Linus's. both said the same thing. The Bazaar had looked at something built in New Zealand and said yes, that the question is whether the AI companies entering the open source Bazaar today understand what they are actually asking to earn.
That is the Hamberger report for today. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. You will find links to everything we covered in the description below. I am Andreas Hamberger, and I will see you tomorrow.
Like and subscribe.